This Halloween, when nightmares are more than fleeting visions and shadows conceal far darker shapes, a twisted convergence of evil is set to unfold. Freddy Krueger, the sadistic dream killer of Elm Street, stalks the unconscious, savoring fear as his blade-tipped glove tears through flesh and mind alike. Jason Voorhees, the silent juggernaut of Camp Crystal Lake, prowls the woods with an unstoppable hunger for vengeance, his lifeless eyes that have seen nothing but blood. But fate has a twisted sense of humor, and a new player is drawn into their brutal dance of death, the Deadite slayer and chainsaw-armed hero, the king himself, Ashley J. Williams. In today's video, as Hell's forces rip the very fabric between worlds, these legends of horror clash in a blood-soaked inferno where only one will be left standing, or none at all. Prepare for a battle where dreams, flesh, and steel collide and explode in a crescendo of terror. In this nightmarish war, even death itself trembles. Freddy vs Jason vs Ash. The ultimate showdown begins. Act 0. The Bloody Breadcrumbs, the final Friday. In Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, Jason Voorhees was lured back to Camp Crystal Lake by a lone woman who turned out to be an undercover FBI agent. She set up a trap, and as Jason approached, he was ambushed by a team of FBI SWAT agents. In a brutal assault, they launched a barrage of firepower, ultimately obliterating his body with a grenade launcher. His body was blown apart, with his head and limbs scattered across the area. His faintly beating heart rolled away in the grass, leaving Jason seemingly dead. However, Jason had a dark secret. His soul had discovered a sinister way to survive by forcing others to ingest his heart, allowing him to jump from one body to another. This unnatural ability kept him alive, continuing his killing spree through a string of possessed victims. Jason's goal, however, was to resurrect himself fully in his own body. To do that, he needed to find and possess a member of his bloodline. The only surviving relatives were his half-sister, Diana Kimball, her daughter, Jessica, and Jessica's infant daughter, Stephanie. As Jason made his way toward his relatives, leaving a trail of blood behind him, a bounty hunter named Creighton Duke, who had been tracking Jason's movements, uncovered a critical piece of information. Only a member of Jason's own bloodline could permanently kill him, and if Jason managed to possess one of his family members, he would return to his near-invincible state. Duke knew the stakes were high and set out to stop Jason before it was too late. Jason targeted Diana, attempting to possess her, but Stephen Freeman, Jessica's ex-boyfriend, tried to protect her. Despite his efforts, Diana was killed and Stephen was arrested by the police. In jail, he encountered Duke, who revealed the truth about Jason and his connection to Jessica. Realizing the danger Jessica was in, Stephen escaped from jail, determined to reach her before Jason could. As the confusion unfolded, Duke armed Jessica with a Kandarian dagger, the same one seen in Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. It was the only weapon capable of killing Jason, thanks to his mother, Pamela Voorhees, who had read from the Necronomicon Ex Mortis to make a deal with the devil and bring her son back to life. Jason was a Deadite. In the climactic battle, Jason was fully resurrected when his heart possessed Diana's corpse. Stephen and Jason fought viciously outside Camp Crystal Lake, while Jessica retrieved the dagger. In a desperate move, she stabbed Jason in the chest, using the enchanted weapon. As the souls Jason had taken over the years were released, demonic hands erupted from the ground, grabbing hold of Jason and dragging him down to hell. Despite his efforts to pull Stephen down with him, Jessica managed to free Stephen, leaving Jason to his eternal fate. In the aftermath, a dog unearthed Jason's iconic mask while digging in the dirt. Suddenly, Freddy Krueger's sinister laugh echoed, and his gloved hand burst from the ground, pulling Jason's mask into hell, hinting at the beginning of Freddy's plan to use Jason for his own bloodthirsty purposes. Freddy vs Jason. Freddy Krueger had been trapped in hell since his last defeat. Unable to haunt the dreams of Springwood's children, the town's adults had gone to great lengths to erase all memory of him, removing any mention of Freddy from public records. Children who still dreamed of him were sent to Westin Hills Psychiatric Hospital, where they were given Hypnosil, a drug that suppressed dreams, to prevent Freddy's influence from spreading. Determined to regain his power, Freddy resurrected Jason Voorhees, appearing as his mother, Pamela Voorhees. He manipulated Jason into going to Elm Street to kill, hoping the resulting fear would make the townspeople believe Freddy had returned, thus restoring his strength. Laurie Campbell, living with her widowed father, was having a sleepover with her friends Kia, Gibbs' abusive boyfriend Trey, and their friend Blake. That night, Jason murdered Trey, followed by Blake and his father. The police, wanting to keep Freddy's return a secret, claimed the deaths were a murder-suicide. Laurie's ex-boyfriend, Will Rollins, and his friend Mark Davis, who were patients at Westin Hills due to their past encounters with Freddy, saw news of the killings and escaped to warn Laurie. Later, Laurie and her friends attended a rave in a cornfield where Freddy attempted to kill Gibb in a nightmare. However, Jason killed Gibb in the real world, then went on a killing spree at the rave, frustrating Freddy, who realized Jason's rampage was depriving him of potential victims. The group, now joined by school nerd Charlie and stoner Bill, witnessed Mark being killed by Freddy. Deputy Scott Stubbs teamed up with the teens, and they learned about Hypnosil. They attempted to steal the drug from Westin Hills to suppress their dreams, but Freddy, possessing Bill, destroyed the supply. Jason killed Stubbs, and Freddy used the possessed Bill to tranquilize Jason, making him fall asleep. The teens hatched a plan to bring Freddy into the real world and force him to fight Jason. They transported the unconscious Jason back to Camp Crystal Lake in New Jersey, hoping the two killers would destroy each other. In the dream world, Freddy and Jason battled, with Freddy exploiting Jason's fear of drowning to gain the upper hand by forcing him to revert to his younger self. Laurie fell asleep to pull Freddy out of the dream world and save Jason. During her nightmare, Freddy revealed he had been responsible for her mother's death. Meanwhile, Jason woke up at Camp Crystal Lake and began hunting the teens, fatally injuring Charlie. Laurie pulled Freddy into the real world, leading to a brutal confrontation between Freddy and Jason. The fight raged throughout the camp, with Jason ultimately killing Kia. Freddy gained the upper hand, but Laurie distracted him, giving Jason a chance to stab Freddy through the torso. Freddy retaliated by stabbing Jason with his own machete, and Jason ripped off Freddy's gloved arm. Laurie and Will set the dock on fire, triggering an explosion that threw both Freddy and Jason into the lake. As Freddy climbed out to kill Laurie and Will, Jason impaled him with his own severed arm, and Laurie beheaded Freddy with Jason's machete. Both killers sank into the lake. The next morning, Jason emerged from the water holding Freddy's head. As he walked away, Freddy winked, leaving the victor uncertain. Act 1, goriest of all time. Chapter 1, A Nightmare at Crystal Lake. 5 years had passed since the infamous battle between Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees. The town of Crystal Lake, now renamed Forest Green, had undergone significant changes. New roads, modern condos, and even a massive super mega ultra S-Mart had been constructed in an effort to bury the town's bloody history. Despite these attempts to rebuild, the horrors that once terrorized the lake couldn't be forgotten so easily. The brutal memories of the battles between Jason and Freddy still cast a long shadow. The two killers had faced off in relentless combat, with Jason wielding his deadly machete and Freddy slashing with his infamous razor glove. Their history was etched in violence, with each leaving behind a trail of carnage that lingered over the lake. Jason was as unstoppable as ever, while Freddy's terrifying legacy as a nightmare-inducing murderer continued to hang over everything. Meanwhile, Will and Laurie were making their way back to the lake, driving down the snow-covered roads. Laurie felt a gnawing unease in the pit of her stomach, as though something was terribly wrong. She finally broke the silence, confronting Will about why he hadn't been talking. She asked him if he still loved her, and though Will reassured her, the hesitation in his voice betrayed the fear they both were feeling. Laurie couldn't shake the feeling that Freddy and Jason weren't really gone, and this unsettling suspicion had driven her to return to Crystal Lake, seeking the truth. When they arrived, the air was thick with tension. The place had changed so much, yet Laurie's dread only deepened as they stepped out into the cold. Both she and Will wanted to leave before nightfall, but Laurie felt she had no choice. She had to know if the nightmare was truly over. As they explored the area, she stumbled upon something that made her blood run cold. A trail of blood smeared across a tree. Her heart raced, and she whispered Jason's name under her breath, as if his presence still lingered, haunting the area like a spectre. Her worst fears materialized when she discovered more blood. Before she could react, Will was suddenly attacked and dragged away by an unseen force. Panicked, Laurie screamed for him and rushed to his aid, but she was too late. She found Will's body gruesomely impaled on the wall, his torso split in half, his guts spilling out. Tears flooded her eyes as the reality of the nightmare hit her like a wave. She screamed in disbelief. "This can't be! We survived! "We beat Freddy and Jason!" Laurie's desperation to survive kicked in, but Jason was relentless. He emerged from the shadows, swinging his machete, cutting through her as she tried to escape. She could feel the sting of the blade as it grazed her, her options dwindling with each step. Laurie knew she couldn't outrun him forever. Jason continued to stalk her, crashing through walls, his machete slicing through the air as Laurie narrowly avoided death. She hid, hoping for a reprieve, but Jason's blade pierced through the wall, missing her by a mere inch. Despite the terror coursing through her veins, Laurie wasn't ready to give up. She refused to let Jason win, fueled by the pain and anger of losing Will. But Jason's ruthlessness knew no bounds. He picked up an iron beam and hurled it at her, impaling her through the shoulder, pinning her to the wall. Breathing heavily, Laurie managed to pull herself free, blood spilling from her wounds. She glanced at Jason, who stood watching her, his cold eyes devoid of emotion. Grief overwhelmed her, but it quickly gave way to a burning rage. She had lost too much, suffered too greatly. She couldn't just survive this. She had to end it. Laurie vowed to herself that Freddy and Jason had taken their last victims. With newfound resolve, Laurie set a trap, luring Jason into one final confrontation. As he closed in on her, she reflected on everything that had led her to this moment. She realized she hadn't just been chosen to survive. She had been chosen to end the terror that had plagued her and countless others. Determined, she called out to Jason, her voice steady, as she started up an electric saw she found, ready for the fight ahead. Laurie grabbed the saw and attacked Jason, her anger and determination driving her forward with every strike. The blade slashed deep into Jason's chest, sending blood spraying as she dodged his retaliatory swings. With a swift motion, Laurie brought the saw down on Jason's back, the teeth of the saw tearing through his flesh. She screamed at him, demanding to know when it would be enough, when he would stop taking and killing. Laurie's fury fueled her strength, and with a final, powerful blow, she sent Jason flying out of the window. His body crashed through the glass, falling into the snow below, where he lay bleeding and motionless. Believing that she was the only one who could put an end to this nightmare, Laurie was convinced she was the chosen one. This was her moment. Steeling herself, she went downstairs, determined to finish the job once and for all. But just as she opened the door, Jason appeared from behind, his silent, menacing figure looming over her. Before she could even react, Jason brought his machete down onto her face, slicing through with a brutal, sickening force. Laurie's body went limp, and she fell to the ground, her struggle over in an instant. Inside, as Jason moved further, Freddy's head materialized from a nearby sign, his face twisted into a sinister smile, mocking Jason with his trademark laugh. His presence was a reminder that the nightmare was far from over. Meanwhile, at the S-Mart department store, Caroline, aka Carrie, Davy, and Raoul were having a good time, goofing off and cracking jokes with each other. Raoul, in particular, made a crude remark about his candy cane, and the others joined in, laughing without a care in the world. However, their fun was cut short when the store manager scolded them for not taking their work seriously. He lectured them about how their behavior was disgraceful to the store, especially with the holidays and the Forest Green renaming ceremony around the corner. Despite his rant, the trio decided to get back at him, sneaking a sign that read, "I lick jingle balls," onto his back. They shared another laugh as they watched him walk away, oblivious to the sign. Back in the cabin, Jason dragged the lifeless bodies of Will and Laurie inside, their blood leaving a dark trail behind them. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit, and on a makeshift shrine, Jason had placed the decapitated heads of his mother, Pamela Voorhees, and Freddy Krueger. As he stood there, staring at the heads, they suddenly vanished. Freddy's laughter echoed through the room, taunting Jason. Jason's mind began to drift, and soon he found himself in a dream. He was back at Camp Crystal Lake. He could see the camp counselors engaging in sex while the other kids tormented him, mocking and bullying him as they always had. Anger surged through him as he walked toward the cabin, only to witness the horrific sight of Freddy Krueger having sex with his mother, Pamela Voorhees. Rage boiled inside Jason as he raised his machete, ready to kill Freddy for desecrating his mother. But before he could strike, Freddy turned toward Pamela, spitting in her face, and sneered at Pamela to remind her boy how to behave with his new daddy. Pamela, in a motherly and reassuring tone, told Jason that he needed a daddy and assured him that Freddy would make sure no one picked on him anymore. Freddy would give Jason what he had always wanted, the chance to be a normal boy. All Jason had to do was free Freddy from the confines of his peanut-sized brain. She instructed Jason to return to their old house near Crystal Lake and retrieve the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead, which was buried deep in the cellar. This book, made from human flesh, held the blood-written phrases to free Freddy. She asked Jason, "You want that, don't you, Jason, dear? To be a normal little boy?" Meanwhile, a car pulled up outside the S-Mart and a man stared out from within. It was Ash Williams, the single-handed Deadite killer and scourge of the evil dead. As he sat there, Ash reminisced about his past life, back when he was just a regular guy working in housewares at Detroit's S-Mart. Those days felt like ancient history. Once, he had lived a real, ordinary life, but that was long ago. Now, his world revolved around two things: cutting down any Deadites that stood in his way and destroying the Necronomicon, the cursed book responsible for untold horrors. Ash reflected on how he had no idea he would be drawn into the conflict between Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger. He hadn't known that the Necronomicon, with its supernatural influence, was pulling him into this mess. But Ash's purpose remained clear. He was there to eliminate any threats, particularly Deadites, and to destroy the Necronomicon once and for all, giving him a chance at some semblance of peace. As he stepped out of his car and walked toward the mart, Jason watched him from the shadows, silent and waiting. Chapter 2. Ash and Burn, baby! Ash Williams arrived outside S-Mart, reflecting on how Crystal Lake had now become home to a super-ultra-mega S-Mart warehouse store. He sarcastically thought to himself, recalling how he was sent to clean up the housewares department. But in reality, he knew he was there for another purpose, dealing with something much bigger. As he walked toward the store, a trio of young women passed by, laughing and joking. Ash confidently introduced himself to the ladies. "Hello, ladies. Name's Ash, but you can call me any time." As Ash strutted along, the store manager interrupted him, identifying him as Mr. Ashley J. Williams. He gave Ash a stern lecture about punctuality, pointing out that Ash was already 7 minutes late. He emphasized that at Super Ultra Mega S-Mart, they held employees to a higher standard. Ash brushed it off, but the moment was interrupted as Jason Voorhees lurked in the shadows, watching everything unfold. The women continued joking around as they walked past, mocking Ash's outdated demeanor, with one of them crudely making remarks about their own appearance. They laughed, completely unaware of the danger creeping closer. Jason, his mask expressionless, but his intent clear, continued to watch them from the trees. He saw images of Freddy in them. They kept mocking him with their burnt-off skin and flesh. Suddenly, Jason attacked. He violently slashed one of the girls, Paris, cutting her in half with a machete as her friends screamed in horror. The scene quickly turned into chaos, with blood spraying from Jason's brutal attack. The remaining women, terrified and desperate, tried to flee, but Jason wasn't done. He grabbed them both, smashing their heads together with such force that they were instantly killed, their blood splattering across the snow. A passerby, witnessing the carnage, screamed for help, causing a scene. Inside the S-Mart, security was alerted, and Ash Williams, now being introduced as the new sheriff in housewares, was quickly called to the scene by the store manager. As Ash made his way outside, the reality of the bloodshed began to dawn on him. When he reached the site, he found the gruesome aftermath, blood and bodies strewn across the snow. Kneeling next to a shocked woman, Ash asked what had happened, but she could only mumble incoherently, pointing toward the trees. As Ash inspected the scene, the familiar dread began to settle in. The old lady who called for help screamed, "Jason!" Ash muttered, "Blood! This ain't good." Before he could process more, the sound of police sirens filled the air. Ash's usual irreverence kicked in as he muttered about the cops being a nuisance. When the officers arrived, Ash found himself the subject of their suspicion, but the store manager vouched for him, explaining that Ash had been inside the store when the killings occurred. The officers weren't entirely convinced, with one of them clearly holding a grudge against Ash's attitude. He threatened to keep an eye on Ash, insinuating that trouble seemed to follow him around wherever he went. Ash, in his typical style, shot back with a smart remark, but his focus was already shifting back to the matter at hand. Back inside the store, Ash and his team of young, somewhat clueless employees had a tense conversation about what was happening. Ash explained how Jason Voorhees was connected to Camp Crystal Lake and the terrible events that had occurred there years ago. The discussion soon turned to the Necronomicon, the ancient book of evil that Ash had been chasing for years, that summoned Deadites which could possess humans and wear them like condoms. He was determined to find it and put an end to the madness. But it was clear that Jason's presence complicated things further. Suddenly, Raoul put on a hockey mask and attacked Ash with an ice stick. Ash blocked it and kicked him down. He was going to bloody him up when Davy stopped him and said that Raoul was just joking. Jason, after brutally slaughtering the women from earlier, returned to his lair with their decapitated bodies. In his mind, Freddy appeared, taunting him like a twisted father figure. Freddy manipulated Jason further, instructing him to retrieve the Necronomicon so they could have father and son story time. Freddy mocked Jason's mental capacity, ridiculing him for his oversized, cancerous brain that, according to Freddy, couldn't comprehend anything without the book. Freddy promised Jason that once he had the Necronomicon, he would read him a special story titled The Nightmare Beyond Elm Street, all while laughing maniacally as flames flared around them. Meanwhile, Jason made his way toward a Do Not Enter sign, with Freddy's manipulative words echoing in his head. He soon reached the Voorhees house. There, he stumbled upon a group of carolers led by an overly strict choir conductor. The carolers, oblivious to the approaching threat, focused obsessively on perfecting their songs. Jason wasted no time, launching into a bloody rampage by striking the conductor first, causing chaos to erupt within the group. As Jason continued his massacre, more carolers fell to his vicious attacks. One of the victims, a girl, was impaled through the chest with a metal rod, her blood spraying everywhere. Another was ruthlessly attacked, leaving their severed heads rolling near a blood-soaked book as the remaining carolers looked on in horror. Elsewhere, Ash was inside S-Mart, flirting with a woman named Bree, who was shopping for camping supplies. Bree flirted back, playfully asking Ash to help her fill her cart, suggesting she intended to camp at a cabin. Enjoying the exchange, Ash helped her gather supplies. When Bree revealed she didn't have enough cash, Ash generously offered to use his employee discount. They made plans to head out to the Voorhees house for the night before it was torn down. Bree's friends, however, left Ash behind as they drove away, prompting Ash to mutter about how much he hated frat boys. The group that tricked Ash into helping them had already entered the Voorhees house, laughing about how easy it was to manipulate him. As they prepared for their sexual activities, Jason watched them from outside, his expression eerily calm beneath his mask. Ash, driving off in his old car, was tailed by Carrie, who followed him to ensure he didn't get into more trouble. When Ash finally reached the Voorhees house, he knew the Necronomicon would be in the fruit cellar, typically filled with spiders and skeletal remains. Meanwhile, inside the house, the teens continued their lustful activities, unaware that Jason was about to burst in and unleash a violent killing spree. Jason broke in, tearing one girl in half with his bare hands, spraying blood and guts everywhere. He then grabbed a boy's head and crushed it in his hands, causing blood to ooze from every opening. As Jason wreaked havoc, Ash got closer to finding the book. Finally, Ash located the Necronomicon beneath the floorboards, making a sarcastic comment about how predictable it was to find the book in such a place. Upstairs, as Jason raised his machete to decapitate another couple in the midst of having sex, Ash retrieved the Necronomicon, smirking as he said, "Gotcha!" Right then, a bloody machete sliced through the ceiling of the cellar, and Ash screamed in shock. "Criminy!" He ran up to find the kids decapitated. He frantically called out for Bree. Bree ran out of her room in a towel. All the while she was in the shower. Bree whispered to Ash in shock, saying that everyone was dead. Ash kissed her to put her at ease and said like a true hero, "But we're not." As Jason attacked, Ash dodged his machete and shot Jason in the chest with his shotgun, A21. He screamed at Bree to get to the car. Ash too went outside and tried starting the car, but the trash failed him. As Jason walked up to them with his machete, bleeding from his shotgun wound, Ash kept screaming, "Come on, you piece of shit, start, damn it, start!" Chapter 3. Honey! Freddy's home! Ash and Bree found themselves trapped in the car as Jason Voorhees rapidly approached. Bree, panicking, urged Ash to start the car, her voice shaking with fear. Meanwhile, Ash, in his usual sarcastic tone, remarked that Jason wasn't just a late trick-or-treater, but likely a manifestation of a Deadite, intent on stopping him from getting the Necronomicon. Even with Bree's terror mounting, Ash remained calm, commenting dryly about his car's unreliable starter, all while vowing to face Jason head-on. Jason, not slowing down, hurled his bloodied machete straight at the car. The machete crashed through the window with a sickening crack, but Ash, reacting quickly, caught it with his mechanical hand, exclaiming "Whoa!" as Bree screamed in terror. Jason continued his relentless pursuit, showing no signs of stopping. Ash and Bree barely managed to escape the car before Jason smashed it into pieces with brutal force. Once they were out, the pair ran into the snow, trying to gain some distance. Ash stumbled and fell, tumbling into the icy ground, while Bree followed closely behind. Jason, relentless as ever, bulldozed through everything in his path, his massive frame making short work of obstacles. Amidst the chaos, Carrie arrived in another car, slamming into Jason and knocking him off his feet. She shouted for Ash to get in. Ash, surprised but grateful, asked how she knew to find him. Carrie responded simply, explaining that something told her he would need help. With Carrie behind the wheel, they sped away, but Bree remained in shock, repeating over and over that everyone was dead. Ash tried to calm her down, reminding her that the monster, Jason, was still alive and coming for them, urging them to act quickly. They decided to head back to S-Mart, hoping to regroup and come up with a plan to deal with both the Deadites and Jason. Meanwhile, deep inside Jason's mind, Freddy Krueger was at work. He had taken the form of a twisted schoolteacher, addressing Jason's childlike form in a nightmarish classroom. Mocking Jason's mental limitations, Freddy taunted him for failing to retrieve the Necronomicon. As Jason, now appearing as a young boy, sat in silence, Freddy cruelly slashed his head open, peeling back the scalp to reveal Jason's brain. Freddy mocked him further, sarcastically noting how much space there was for a hot tub inside Jason's skull. While tormenting the boyish version of Jason, Freddy uncovered information. The Necronomicon was at S-Mart. He then planned to send Jason to retrieve it, continuing his manipulation from within Jason's mind. Back in the real world, Ash and Bree arrived at S-Mart, where they encountered a group of oblivious and rowdy employees. The employees, clueless about the real danger, laughed and made crude jokes, ignoring Ash's warnings about Jason being real and on a killing spree. Holding the Necronomicon, Ash warned them that Deadites were real and Jason was a brutal killer. Just as they began to plan, Jason entered the store, igniting immediate panic. The massive killer wasted no time in unleashing carnage. His first victim was a woman who screamed his name. He drove the machete through her head. He then cut a man in half with his machete. He lifted a shopping cart and slammed it on an old man's head. The floor was instantly painted with her entrails as the metal bars of the cart tore through his flesh. In another aisle, Jason picked up a lady, effortlessly lifting her and impaling her to the nails on the wall. Ash, Bree, and Carrie found themselves witnessing Jason Voorhees' brutal massacre in the store. Bree, paralyzed with fear, gasped that Jason was killing everyone, while Carrie, clutching the Necronomicon tightly to her chest, muttered in shock, "Dead, dead, dead." As the carnage unfolded, Ash seemed strangely detached, slowly walking away from the chaos. Bree, panicking, shouted after him, reminding him that he was the chosen one, and that they couldn't stop Jason without him. But Ash ignored her, heading toward the exit. As Carrie tried to take control, the store manager appeared, demanding that she clear the shoppers from the store and call the police. But before they could act, Jason loomed behind the manager. In a split second, Jason raised his machete and slashed the manager's head in half, blood splattering in all directions. The horrifying sight made Bree realize that Jason was after the Necronomicon. Carrie shouted at her, urging Bree to move, yelling that Jason wanted the book. Just then, Ash reappeared, now clad in his signature makeshift chainsaw on his right hand and a shotgun in his left, the boomstick, as he called it. With a burst of bravado, he prepared to face Jason once more. He taunted Jason, calling him Wayne Deadski. Ash fired his shotgun, but Jason was relentless, barely slowing down. The two engaged in a fierce fight, Ash swinging his chainsaw at Jason, who easily blocked it. Jason managed to knock the chainsaw out of Ash's hand and hurled him through the store's walls with incredible strength, crashing him through shelves and signs. Meanwhile, Jason turned his attention back to Bree, who was still holding the Necronomicon. He grabbed it from her hands, his deadly intent clear. As he walked away, leaving Bree behind, Carrie ran over to find her friend, only to discover the horrifying sight. Bree's throat had been slashed to pieces, and she was dead, drenched in her own blood. Carrie and the other survivors gathered, reeling from the shock of Bree's death and Jason's unstoppable rampage. Jason, having claimed the Necronomicon, returned to his lair, where Freddy Krueger waited, still inside Jason's mind. Jason opened the book and placed Freddy's severed head in front of it. Freddy, grinning with twisted delight, began to read the ancient passages aloud. Klaatu, Verata, Nikto, Freddy chanted, and the dark magic of the Necronomicon came alive once more. As the power surged, Freddy's voice oozed with triumph, mocking Jason as he manipulated the unstoppable killer. Freddy smirked and said, "Well, brainless boy, a deal's a deal. Let's see if a few words from the book can breathe life into those deadhead brain cells of yours." Jason stood silently as Freddy continued. "Come on, Jason. You did your part. Now I'll make sure we keep this nightmare going. Time to see what nightmares we can wake up next." Ash and the survivors gathered in a dimly lit room to discuss why Jason Voorhees was so determined to get the Necronomicon. One of the employees wondered why Jason would want it, pointing out that he didn't have the brains to read the Book of the Dead. Ash explained that someone else must be pulling the strings, using Jason as a puppet to get the book. The team realized they needed to cut those metaphorical strings to take Jason down. Ash added that the book had the power to send Jason to the Deadites' dimension, which could trap him forever. They planned to go back to the Voorhees house in the morning to retrieve the Necronomicon. Ash, armed and still confident, told the others to get some rest. While everyone else settled down to sleep, Ash decided to stay awake and keep watch. However, he struggled to stay alert and eventually dozed off. In his sleep, Ash began to experience strange sensations. He woke up confused, only to notice something peculiar about his hand. His severed hand was back, fully intact. Excited at first, he marveled at how it was just like before the Deadites ruined his life. However, his joy quickly turned to horror as his hand started to change. Long, sharp razor blades emerged from his fingers, transforming it into Freddy's monstrous hands. Freddy Krueger appeared, laughing maniacally, his laughter echoing in Ash's mind. Ash, on the floor, clutched his mutated hand and cursed, "You bastards, you took my hand again!" Chapter 4: Mortal Kombat. Ash kept screaming, looking at his mutated hand. He knew that once he had been marked as the Chosen One, his fate was doomed, for he was marked with farewell to arms. He remembered how the Deadites had got to his right hand and made him cut it off during the events of Evil Dead 2. He staggered towards the tool shed and searched out a chainsaw that he was planning to use to cut off his hands again. And he did it. He took the chainsaw and cut off his razor hand. He had handled it before, and he could handle it now. Blood oozed out of the wound, but from inside each drop of blood, Freddy laughed. His image appeared in the pool of blood below as he mocked Ash. "What's the matter, Ash? Having a little deja vu?" Multiple small Freddys started appearing out of Ash's blood on the floor. Freddy started reciting his infamous nursery rhyme. 1, 2, little Freddys for you. 3, 4, better watch the floor. 5, 6, gonna gut you quick. 7, 8, watch us coagulate. 9, 10, Freddy's whole again. As he recited the final line, all the little Freddys joined up and made Freddy's body whole. He expressed his relief at being free from Jason's mind, mocking the masked hillbilly Jason, and said he couldn't bear being trapped in his mind much longer. Ash made his intentions clear. He was there for the Necronomicon, and as soon as Freddy gave it up, Ash could complete the job of killing him, but he was still confused about the nature of Freddy's power and referred to him as some sort of effed up Deadite. Freddy quickly corrected him, revealing his true identity. "Freddy Krueger, the king, baby!" He taunted Ash about the dreamscape being his playground, where he could control everything and everyone. Freddy wanted the Necronomicon to cement his power and reign over both the real world and the dream world. Freddy proposed to Ash to play a game, Pin the Claw. Saying this, he launched his razor hand towards Ash. Ash managed to grab his shotgun and blasted the hand backward with a powerful boom. However, Freddy was undeterred. Ash sarcastically remarked that he was always poor at party game skills. He challenged Freddy to play a game of truth or die, in which Freddy would have to provide the answers Ash sought, or Freddy would get one from his boomstick. Freddy commented that Ash wasn't fast enough to stop Mother Nature. He referred to blades multiplying like jackrabbits, as smaller clawed hands began to surround Ash once again, ready to tear him apart. Ash, realizing the dire situation, hoped desperately that if it was all just a dream, it would be a good time to wake up. Suddenly he realized that he had just fired his shotgun and the barrel was still searing hot. He immediately pressed the barrel on the skin of his severed hand. Ash immediately woke out of the nightmare and found that he had a burn wound on his right arm where he had pressed the gun barrel. He immediately shouted at everyone to wake up, but Carrie said that Davey wouldn't wake up no matter how hard they tried. Freddy Krueger orchestrated a twisted dodgeball nightmare, tormenting Dave in his dream state. The scene began with Freddy in a gym class setting, mocking the students as he picked teams. Chet and Selma were chosen as captains, but Dave was left as an unwanted pick, with the group cruelly arguing about who should be stuck with him. Freddy, taking over as coach, singled out Dave, humiliating him further by suggesting that he had feelings for Carrie. As Freddy sneered at Dave's failed romantic hopes, he challenged him to a lethal game of dodge or die. Dave, terrified, tried to escape, but Freddy unleashed a barrage of deadly dodgeballs, which pummeled and injured Dave severely. He was struck multiple times, his chest and body battered and bruised by the relentless onslaught. The dream became a deadly reality as the blows took their toll on Dave, causing his actual body to suffer critical damage. Back in the waking world, Ash and the others realized that Dave was in mortal danger. Trapped in Freddy's nightmare, Carrie and the group desperately tried to wake him up, but it was too late. Multiple Freddys gained on Dave in his dream and started to claw at him. As Dave's injuries from the dream manifested in real life, he collapsed, bleeding out. The group, horrified, watched helplessly as Dave died from the wounds inflicted by Freddy. Meanwhile, in Freddy's twisted domain, he gloated over the damage he had caused, relishing the suffering he inflicted. He was pleased with his growing strength, mocking Jason as a mere tool in his larger plan. Freddy's influence over the situation was clear as he continued to manipulate events, ensuring his control over both the dream world and the real world. Freddy's plan was far from over. As he sent Jason out, Freddy ordered him to remove his mother's rotting body and go hunt the kids, while he did a heavy reading on Necronomicon to amplify his powers. Ash, Carrie, and the others quickly realized the gravity of their situation. They were facing two unstoppable forces in Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees. Freddy was gaining strength, using Jason to do his dirty work while he tormented the group through nightmares, and now they had to act fast before Freddy grew even stronger. Ash, Carrie, and the others regrouped, and Ash gave them a plan. They would stock up on weapons and explosives to take down both Jason and Freddy. Carrie, Raoul, and Jarvis were instructed to gather supplies, while Ash and Carrie grabbed the rest of the gear. With the tension rising, Ash remained focused on getting the Necronomicon back from Freddy and sending both monsters to hell. They had little time to spare. They prepped for a showdown, heading to Voorhees' lair. Ash's confidence surged as he upgraded his chainsaw to a lightning chain, one capable of cutting through beams of steel. The plan was simple. Rig the explosives on the porch of Jason's hideout, bait Jason into stepping onto the porch, and blow him to bits. Ash emphasized that no one could afford to die, not now. He had enough blood on his hands and didn't want any more losses. As Raoul and Jarvis scouted ahead in the dark woods, they encountered Jason, and panic quickly set in. Jason's silent but menacing presence threw them off, and in a moment of fear, one of them wet themselves, barely managing to stay hidden as Jason stalked closer. Meanwhile, Carrie, stationed in the van, watched Jason from a distance, knowing they were moments away from springing the trap. Carrie, sitting in the car, saw Jason moving toward the explosives, but suddenly he stopped in his tracks. He turned his head and looked directly at Carrie in the car, raising his hand and making a deliberate no gesture with his index finger. At that moment, Carrie realized Jason had evolved into being more intelligent somehow, and a deep sense of dread washed over her. Ash wandered cautiously through the darkened building, wielding his upgraded chainsaw, searching for the Necronomicon. When he finally found the book, he sarcastically referred to it as Necronomicon Excrapius, mocking it as the Book of the Shitty Dead. He reached for it, ready to recite the banishment passages, but before he could react, something monstrous attacked attacked him from behind. Suddenly, Freddy's clawed hand pierced Ash's neck, causing him to scream in agony. Ash, surprised and in pain, thought if he was dreaming again. Freddy revealed that he was now free from Jason's influence, thanks to Ash and the book. He made it clear that with the Necronomicon, he planned to rule both the waking and dream worlds, and kill all the children of Elm Street in every corner of the world. Despite his pain, Ash managed to joke and mock Freddy, calling him shredded beef, and proclaiming himself as the chosen one. He vowed to stop Freddy from using the book, and promised to send him back to hell before he could enact his plan. Freddy gloated and unleashed a powerful spell from the book, enveloping the room in a fiery orange glow. Ash tried to block the attack with his chainsaw, but it was too late. The orange energy flew outside and wrapped around Jason, seemingly binding him. Ash cursed himself for not seeing it sooner. Monstrous razor hands flew and pinned Ash to the wall. Freddy laughed maniacally, referring to the situation as the best hand job ever. The situation grew more dire when Jason crashed through a door, ready to engage in battle. He somehow knew that Freddy was bad, thanks to his newfound intelligence. Freddy reminded Jason about their previous alliance, wondering aloud what Jason's mother would think of his betrayal. Freddy, never one to back down from a fight, summoned the souls of Jason's past victims. He urged them to rise and take revenge on Jason, offering them the chance to deliver Jason a taste of his own brutality. As the zombified victims swarmed Jason, Freddy's laughter echoed in the background. Chapter 5. Nightmare World. Freddy stood towering over Jason, taunting him as Jason's past victims rose from the dead, now vengeful zombies clawing and holding him down. He mocked Jason, joking about breaking out the beans and wieners, since Jason's old Camp Crystal Lake buddies were just dying to see him again. Freddy laughed maniacally, relishing Jason's torment as the zombies pinned him. In a swift move, Freddy's disembodied razor-fingered hands flew through the air, grabbing Jason's machete. It flew and drove the blade into Jason's back. He called Jason a dumbass and sneered about how Jason couldn't even turn his back without falling victim to his own weapon. Freddy savoured every moment, gloating that Jason should have known better than to trust anyone. Jason turned and looked at Freddy. He was infuriated. He summoned all his strength to shake off the zombies. He gripped the machete's blade protruding from his chest and, in a gruesome display, dragged it through his own torso, pulling the blood-soaked machete out from his chest. Blood and gore splattered everywhere. Freddy, momentarily taken aback, tried to recover by turning his attention back to his ultimate goal, the Necronomicon. Confidently, he declared his plan to bring new nightmares to children worldwide, taunting Jason one last time before realizing that his prized book was missing. Frustrated, Freddy exclaimed, "Where's my book?" And then he realized that Ash was not there. He screamed in anger, "Williams, where's my goddamn book?" Freddy's nightmarescape grew and took a gruesome shape. His giant face screamed at Ash as he ran through the woods. Suddenly the trees came alive, possessed by Deadites, and took hold of Ash. Ash shouted at Freddy to get out of his head and come up with his own ideas. Ravens attacked him and started poking and scratching at his flesh, drawing out blood. Ash bit one of the ravens and spit the Deadite bird out. He tried hard and started his lightning chainsaw. He roared in fury and cut his way through the Deadite-infested trees. As he did, a superhero landing and stood up. The final raven flew up, trying to flee the scene. Ash rested the barrel of his boomstick on his shoulder and without even looking, pulled the trigger. The raven blew up mid-air. He said in style, "Oh yeah, hail to the king, birdies! Hail to the king!" Ash walked out of the woods and found Raoul and Jarvis brutally murdered, cursing his own luck for not being there to protect them. The sight filled him with bitter regret, and he clutched Carrie's locket lying there, which reminded him of Linda's loss. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out. Ash turned to see Carrie, who explained how she had hidden in fear, thinking Jason would kill her next, but he had left abruptly, as if distracted. Realizing the danger had escalated, Ash understood that Freddy, now empowered by the Necronomicon, could manipulate reality far beyond his usual dream realm. Carrie confirmed Freddy's newfound abilities, acknowledging that his control over reality had grown disturbingly powerful. They soon located the Necronomicon, which suddenly rose into the air with its pages flipping on their own. The book displayed eerie illustrations of Jason, his mother Pamela, and Freddy. Ash pieced together a chilling realization. Jason was a Deadite, resurrected by Pamela reading from the Necronomicon. This revelation sparked an idea. He could use the book's power to banish both Freddy and Jason back to the Deadite dimension. Ash quickly formed a plan, instructing Carrie to hold on to the Necronomicon and recite the right passage, ending with the words Kla'atu, Verata, Nikto. Together, they aimed to open a rift to trap both monsters. Their planning was interrupted by Freddy's sinister nursery rhyme echoing through the surroundings. Ghostly children appeared, chanting, "1, 2, Freddy's coming for you." When Ash tried to warn them, the undead kids revealed their true nature, attacking him viciously. Unfazed, Ash switched to survival mode, revving his chainsaw and wielding his boomstick to massacre the Deadite children one by one, splattering gore everywhere. When he blew the head of the last child, a snake crawled out, which looked exactly like Freddy. Ash blew it away too, using his boomstick. Amidst the carnage, Freddy seized the opportunity to attack Carrie, grabbing her and taunting her, licking her face in a grotesque attempt to intimidate her. Disgusted, Carrie resisted, calling him a sick bastard. Just then, Jason crashed into the scene, redirecting Freddy's attention. Freddy, feeling invincible, mocked Jason's mindless fury and declared himself a god, wielding his new power to telekinetically hurl massive beams from the Voorhees house down on Jason, attempting to crush him. Seeing his chance, Ash told Carrie to start reading the passage while Jason and Freddy clashed in a brutal showdown. Carrie began the incantation, but before she could finish, Jason lunged toward her, ripping the Necronomicon from her grasp. Ash taunted Jason and then sawed Jason's mask off with his lightning chain, revealing a grotesque, decayed face beneath. "Damn, you're one ugly mother," Ash said. Ash kept the combat heat on. He mocked Jason further, calling him Stumpy, and wondering aloud how to stop a monster that couldn't be killed from killing Carrie and taking the Necronomicon. The idea struck him like a truck. He said to himself, "You disarm him." Saying this, he chainsawed off Jason's hand which had the book, shouting to Carrie, "Quick, Carrie, get the book!" Carrie managed to snatch it up just in time, and Ash urged her to open the portal and send Freddy and Jason back to hell. As Jason and Ash faced each other, Jason took his machete and fitted it where his hand was sawed off. Ash quipped about originality and stood ready to take on Jason alone, but Jason was more powerful. Using brute strength, he threw Ash outside through a glass window. Freddy was still there. He caused the structure around them to shake and eventually collapse. The house's beams and walls crashed down with a deafening rumble, leaving Ash sprawled on the ground as the building crumbled. Chapter 6. To Hell with the Evil Dead. Carrie was desperately trying to wake Ash up, pressing him to come back to consciousness. She was pleading, saying she couldn't do this alone and begging for his help as she clutched the Necronomicon. Ash lay slumped and bruised, showing no signs of responding, and her distress grew. Meanwhile, Ash muttered in his senselessness, "Oh no, the Chosen One is dead. Who's gonna kill the boogeymen?" He sarcastically mused that this job didn't pay enough for him to die for the sake of some panty-waist moviegoers. As he monologued, Carrie tried to drag him back to his senses, all while Freddy mocked her from the background, calling her a little cheerleader. Carrie's desperation grew as Freddy's power filled the area, summoning flames and demonic energy around him. Freddy took advantage of his newfound power, gleefully creating explosions with fiery swipes of his clawed hand, enjoying his absolute control over the scene. Carrie was horrified but managed to hide, clutching the Necronomicon tightly. She knew that keeping the book out of Freddy's hands was her only hope, even as she watched his shadow loom over her hiding spot. As Freddy unleashed his power, he continued to taunt Carrie. He sneered that victims like her always thought they could hide, feeding on her terror and comparing himself to a papa bear ready to devour his prey. His mocking continued with chants and sinister rhymes, including the familiar 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you, fully aware of the psychological torment he was inflicting. His fiery power crackled and boomed as he searched, enjoying the fear he saw in Carrie's eyes. Freddy continued blowing up potential hiding spots with bursts of fire. Each explosion pushed her further into desperation, and she clutched the Necronomicon as her only hope. With a final taunt, Freddy blasted her location, knocking her down as she clung to the book. She whispered to herself, trying to convince herself that none of this was real, but the fear in her eyes betrayed her lack of belief. Freddy lifted her into the air with his claws. As she screamed in terror, he grinned menacingly, savoring her fear. He mocked her once more, twisting his words into a grotesque imitation of religious phrases, claiming he was her god. With his clawed hand, he carved into his own chest, exposing a horrific, monstrous version of himself as he declared, "This is my body, it is your bread. This is my blood, it is your wine." He sneered. "Now eat me, bitch." Carrie's fear reached its peak as she screamed, holding onto the Necronomicon for dear life. Freddy laughed maniacally, enjoying her helplessness. He told her that he would take the Necronomicon, labeling her a choir girl, as he reached for the book, preparing for what he believed to be his ultimate triumph. But right then, Jason appeared, interrupting Freddy's sadistic ritual. Freddy was caught off guard for a moment, but he quickly shifted back to mocking his new opponent, amused at Jason's persistence. He sneered at Jason, asking if he couldn't die like a good little turd, and taunted him with comments about his failures, including the swimming lessons that Jason never passed. Freddy summoned fire and explosions to try and finish Jason off, but Jason fought back, slashing at Freddy with his machete. Despite Freddy's confidence, he found himself growing frustrated with Jason's resilience. Freddy taunted that the Necronomicon had given him powers beyond your little toys, as he lashed out against Jason. At this point, Freddy decided to use his newfound powers to freeze Jason in his tracks. With a chilling breath, he unleashed a freezing blast that immobilized Jason, encasing him in ice and leaving him vulnerable. Confident that Jason was no longer a threat, Freddy turned back to the Necronomicon, ready to finally rid himself of his enemies. The scene reached its height as Freddy opened the Necronomicon and prepared to cast Jason away, taunting him with promises of endless torment in the Deadite dimension. Freddy reveled in his newfound power, ready to banish Jason with the book's spells. He began to chant, attempting to open a portal for Jason's demise. However, Freddy's overconfidence became his downfall. As he chanted, "Klaatu, Verata," he stumbled at the final word. "Nicked, huh?" In that moment, Ash reappeared, crashing a car into Freddy, interrupting the ritual just in time. Freddy was thrown off balance, his grip on the Necronomicon slipping as he was hurled aside by the impact. He came out of his car and told Freddy about the horrors that he had seen, the loved ones he had to dismember, just because of that book. And now that the Necronomicon was being used again, he was not going to back down. He kept beating the living crap out of Freddy with his boomstick. Then he shot Freddy's balls off and said, "Oh, that's gonna leave a mark." But then Freddy pointed at something. Ash turned and muttered, "Uh-oh." Jason had joined the fight and he took a jab at Ash. Ash dodged and Jason broke the ice instead. Ash pulled himself up, muttering about his old Williams luck holding out once again. But the victory was short-lived as he lost his footing and crashed through the ice, sinking into the frozen waters of Crystal Lake. Meanwhile, Jason confronted Freddy and tried to cut him up with his machete. Freddy taunted Jason about strength in numbers and multiplied himself. The clones attacked Jason in unison, claws tearing into him as they shouted, "Get him!" All the Freddys gathered up and started cutting Jason brutally. Jason fought off the clones, slashing through them with brutal efficiency, his machete cutting down each one in a relentless assault. Freddy sneered as he soon found himself outmatched. As Ash struggled underwater, he managed to rev up his chainsaw, cutting a hole through the ice to climb back to the surface. He took aim at Jason and fired his shotgun, blowing a hole straight through Jason's chest. He then turned to Freddy, slashing at him with his chainsaw, sparks and blood flying as a bloody brawl erupted among the three. In the chaos, Jason grabbed Ash and hurled him straight at Freddy, sending both of them tumbling across the frozen lake. Seizing the moment, Carrie began reading aloud from the Necronomicon. As she finished the passage, a portal opened, its immense pull starting to suck everything nearby into its depths. Freddy fought against the force but was ultimately dragged in, screaming in desperation. Jason held his ground, defying the portal's pull with his sheer strength until a flying car collided with him, finally knocking him into the icy lake. As the Necronomicon was being sucked in, Freddy caught hold of it. He tried to read it to stop the portal, but he was sucked into it, the Necronomicon falling from his hands into the frozen lake as the portal closed. In the aftermath, Ash and Carrie caught their breath. Ash, ever the quipper, remarked that Freddy would enjoy his time at Club Deadite as a resident. Carrie asked if Freddy and Jason were truly gone. Ash, not entirely certain, assured her that they'd done their part. Reflecting, Ash mused on how the Necronomicon had manipulated reality to bring him here, perhaps hoping he'd be killed in the process. He concluded that, for now, the nightmare was over, and serves 'em right. With a wry smirk, he mused that it was too good to be the king. As the sun rose over the snowy landscape, the Necronomicon lay silent, marking an end to the violence. Ash walked away with Carrie, leaving the horror behind for now. The Necronomicon lay ominously as its pages fluttered to an illustration, foreshadowing a greater battle between Ash, Freddy, and Jason. Beneath the ice, the book drifted down to where Jason floated in the dark water, and his eyes snapped open as the signature Jason whisper played in the background. Ch-cha-ha. Act 2. The Nightmare Warriors. Chapter 1. Slash and Hack. Jason and Freddy are back. 24 hours after the events of Freddy vs Jason vs Ash, Jason lay at the bottom of Crystal Lake, seemingly lifeless, with the wrecked car pinning him down. His machete, still embedded in his sawed-off hand, rested beside him as he drifted in the dark depths. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoed through the water. It was his mother calling out to him. Her voice was soft but commanding, urging her, "Dear baby boy," to rise once more. She reminded him that he could not die, that this immortality was his gift, granted long ago through the Necronomicon's power. She commanded him to wake up. Above him, the Necronomicon lay open, its pages displaying images from his previous encounters. Freddy, Ash, Carrie, and countless other victims were illustrated in vivid, bloody scenes. The book depicted Jason's trail of death, hinting that his purpose remained unfinished. His mother said that Ashley Williams was a survivor and his soul meant a lot to them. She screamed at him, "Now find him, Jason! Find Ashley Williams and make him pay! Make them all pay!" Meanwhile, above the lake, a tactical team arrived, led by Director Russell, who ordered the retrieval of the Necronomicon. Soldiers in hazmat suits and cold weather gear moved in, securing the area and preparing to retrieve both Jason's body and the Necronomicon. One of the agents expressed skepticism about the Necronomicon's significance, questioning why the unkillable soldier Jason shouldn't be their main target instead. Russell dismissed the question, asserting that the book was a portal to another realm and far more valuable. The hazmat team, despite their doubts, proceeded to thaw out the Necronomicon from its icy prison. As they extracted it, Russell expressed a sense of triumph, describing the Necronomicon as the key to Project Black Book, setting the stage for a larger, unknown plan. As divers explored Crystal Lake to retrieve Jason's body, they encountered eerie visions and disturbing entities lurking underwater. As they secured the perimeter, divers ventured into the lake, inching closer to the submerged Jason. Suddenly, one diver was yanked underwater by a powerful grip. Jason had awakened. He surged upward, dragging his victims with him. Bursting from the lake, Jason ambushed the tactical team. In one swift motion, he drove his machete into an agent's skull, the blade sinking deep. Without hesitation, he grabbed another agent, snapping his neck with a brutal twist. The remaining soldiers fired in panic, but Jason moved through them relentlessly. He slashed the arm off one agent while the others screamed in fear. The field agents got together and shot multiple prods of shock lancers at him. They switched on the highest voltage to fry Jason. Jason screamed in agony as the current coursed through his body, but it didn't slow him down. He yanked out the prods and threw them at the agents instead, electrocuting and killing them. As they gathered together and surrounded him to take him down, Jason cut his way through the agents, leaving a mess of decapitated bodies. His hockey mask, which Ash had cut using the chainsaw, lay on the ground beside a dead agent. He took it up and wore it and walked into the woods while his mother's voice echoed, "Find Ash Williams and kill him for Mommy." 6 months had passed. In Franklin, Michigan, Ash was enjoying a relaxing day, grilling by the pool. He remarked to himself that after the events at Crystal Lake, he'd traded his chainsaw and boomstick for a spatula, a gas grill, and suburban peace with his girlfriend, Carrie. Dressed in a Hawaiian shirt that read "All Hail to the Chef," he playfully asked Carrie if she preferred her meat tender and juicy, or hard and charred. She responded with a kiss, calling him "lover boy." Their peace was interrupted by the doorbell. Carrie, in her bikini, went to answer it and was greeted by a professional-looking woman who introduced herself as Dr. Maggie Burrows. Surprised, Carrie apologized, saying she thought it was someone else. and Maggie explained that she was looking for Ashley Williams. Ash joined them at the door, and Maggie revealed she had been working with Dr. Neil Gordon on a project involving focal magnets for the supernatural. She hinted that people like Ash, who had survived encounters with supernatural entities, were essential to their efforts to combat these forces. Ash dismissed the notion, saying he'd left all that behind and that he was now just focused on having the best lawn on the block. Maggie persisted, warning that the supernatural forces would eventually come for him, threatening everything he cared about. She urged him to consider helping their cause, emphasizing the need for someone with his experience. However, Ash remained indifferent, sarcastically promising to call her if he ever needed a Halloween spook. After Maggie left, Carrie, concerned, asked Ash if he thought this was the start of more trouble. Ash reassured her, claiming Freddy and Jason were dead, and dismissed Maggie as another ghost chaser trying to stir up the past. Carrie seemed unconvinced, but returned to their preparations for a party they were hosting. Soon after, Ash left to pick up more supplies. At a nearby house, a young girl named Stephanie was having a nightmare, seeing Jason Voorhees lurking outside her window. She woke up screaming, believing he had returned, but her mother dismissed it as just a bad dream. Meanwhile, at the store, Ash flirted with the cashier as he picked up a six-pack, but back at his home, Jason burst through the door, attacking Carrie as she screamed. Elsewhere, two teenagers were watching a horror movie in a theater. They became terrified as Freddy Krueger appeared on screen, seemingly breaking the fourth wall to taunt them, causing them to believe he was back. One of the teens, in fear, shouted that Freddy had returned. Meanwhile, back at Ash's house, Jason continued his attack on Carrie, and she, bloody but determined, stabbed Jason in the neck, shouting, "Die, you bastard!" Ash, returning from the store, noticed a man dressed in Freddy's red sweater crossing the road. As the man turned, it was as if Ash could see Freddy's reflection. He realized with horror that both Freddy and Jason might indeed be back. At the Pentagon, Director Russell was briefing Agent Carter on the significance of the Necronomicon. Holding the ancient tome, Russell emphasized its indescribable power, explaining that it could be used to harness the ancient powers of the Deadites. He envisioned an army of darkness under their control, one that no earthly force could withstand. Russell pointed to a page in the Necronomicon depicting Freddy, Jason, and other monstrous figures, as he elaborated on the potential applications: assassination, gathering intelligence, and even manipulating the physical world. Carter, visibly unnerved, expressed his doubts about the book, saying it creeps me out. Russell dismissed his apprehension, asserting that this book was the key to limitless power. "Can you imagine the possibilities once we bring Krueger into the program?" he asked, solidifying his intentions to weaponize Freddy. Meanwhile, Ash returned home, calling out for Carrie. As he entered the house, his face turned to horror. The place was in shambles and Carrie's body was gruesomely impaled on the wall. Blood splattered around her. Her decapitated head was on the barbecue oven. As Ash sat broken in front of the massacre, Carrie's mother screamed in terror, and her father accused Ash of being the killer. As Ash tried to convince Carrie's father that it wasn't him, he screamed, "You killed my little girl!" Chapter 2. All heroes on deck. Ash found himself confronted by Carrie's enraged father, who blamed him for the death of his daughter. Desperate to clear his name, Ash tried to explain that it wasn't his doing, but the father, consumed by fury, refused to listen and punched him in anger. Ash responded with a powerful punch of his own, firmly declaring his love for Carrie and laying the blame on a monster he thought he had defeated long ago. Determined to make things right, he rushed off as police sirens wailed in the distance, a grim reminder of the chaos that surrounded him. Meanwhile, a journal entry recorded the tragic aftermath, noting the casualties and hinting ominously at the potential return of a familiar foe. Elsewhere, Director Russell received urgent news about a spike in energy readings. They had located Subject Zero. With a sense of anticipation, he ordered the Necronomicon translation program to operate at full capacity. Russell envisioned using the eternal evil described in the ancient book to make the nation undefeatable, drawing power from the dark forces he sought to control. A device connected to the Necronomicon began to channel energy, creating a bridge that summoned Subject Zero from the other side. As the machine hummed to life, A disoriented but alive Freddy Krueger was pulled through, naked and visibly confused. Director Russell greeted him with satisfaction, welcoming Freddy back to the land of the living and informing him that they had many questions. Russell's expression reflected a twisted triumph. He had finally harnessed one of the most feared creatures from nightmares. Meanwhile, a young woman named Maggie awoke suddenly, shaken from a troubling nightmare. Her partner, Dr. Neil Gordon from A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, noticed her distress and gently offered her medication, which she declined. Shortly after, her friends, Rennie and Tina, entered the room, concerned by the noises they had heard. Maggie reassured them, though she confided to Neil her deep-seated feeling that something ominous was approaching. Her unease hinted at an impending darkness that she couldn't ignore. At a crowded train station, Ash moved carefully through the throngs of people, acutely aware of the trouble that seemed to follow him wherever he went. News reports of him as a wanted man flashed on a nearby screen, catching the attention of a few onlookers. Holding his ticket, Ash muttered to himself, "You wanted me, you're gonna get me," before boarding the train, steeling himself for the long journey ahead. In a nearby train car, two men who had sneaked aboard congratulated each other and shared a celebratory drink. However, their moment was cut short when Jason Voorhees appeared, mercilessly attacking them. One man died instantly as Jason's machete struck him in the head, leaving the second man to panic and scramble for an escape. The final man crawled desperately away from Jason, attempting to get off the train, but found himself trapped as Jason slammed the door shut on his waist, pinning him in place. The grip was so tight that he began to lose feeling in his legs. Just then, the train passed a low-hanging signal that struck the man's head, reducing the scene to a horrific, bloody massacre. In the morning, Maggie expressed her concerns to Neil while brushing her teeth. She mentioned her unease with the survivor's therapy, drawing comparisons to the failed experiment in Springwood, referencing the events of Freddy vs. Jason. Neil assured her that this group of survivors was different. He explained that survivors of Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees shared unique traits, which they hoped to identify and control to prevent future harm. They kissed, with Neil hinting that the study might also help with his career reinstatement. As they prepared to go meet their guests, Neil noted more visitors were arriving. Stephanie and her father, Stephen, sat in a car outside, with Stephen voicing his skepticism about the therapy program. Stephen and his elder daughter Jessica were the one to send Jason to hell in Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. Stephanie, determined, argued that her mother would have supported her decision to seek help from Dr. Burrows. Despite her father's doubts, she insisted this was something she needed to try. Stephen reluctantly agreed to give it a chance. When they entered the house, Dr. Neil Gordon introduced himself, welcoming Stephanie and her father. Stephanie seemed shy, meeting Maggie, Tina and Rennie, who were also participants in the program. Neil assured Stephen that this therapy had proven effective for survivors like them and expressed his optimism for their progress. Suddenly, Stephanie collapsed, triggering a seizure. The group rushed to her side, with Neil trying to hold her down as her eyes rolled back, revealing an image of a young woman in her pupil. At the train station, the same young woman walked alone as she was approached by a group of men who harassed her, making vile comments and pushing her around. Suddenly, Jason Voorhees appeared behind the men. He inserted his machete into one man's behind, which came out from the front. He squished another's eyes and tore his head free with his bare hands. He threw the head and brought the last one down, then smashed his head under his boots. The scene shifted to a woman lying injured and crying as Jason stood over her. Jason swished his machete. As he turned and left, the girl's head got severed from her mouth and fell to the ground. Elsewhere, Freddy Krueger sat in a prison interrogation room, handcuffed. When asked for a cigarette, he got one from an officer, expressing a thing for fire. Agent Russell, the interrogator, probed into Freddy's past, labeling him as the Springwood slasher and questioning his rise from a mere psychopath to a feared supernatural entity. Freddy reminisced about his best hits, expressing a twisted satisfaction over his past crimes and recalling how his focus was always on children. Russell then brought up the book and implied that the Necronomicon might have played a role in Freddy's transformation, pressing him for answers about its connection to his power. Meanwhile, Neil checked on Maggie, relieved that Stephanie had stabilized after her seizure. Maggie insisted that Stephanie's reaction was further proof of the importance of their research. Just then, more guests arrived, Alice and Jacob Johnson, making Maggie nervous. At his base, Russell continued pressing Freddy, demanding to know how he had accessed the Necronomicon's power. However, the interrogation was interrupted with the news of a killing spree by Jason Voorhees at a Maryland train station. Director Russell ordered Agent Carter to assemble a team to apprehend Jason, instructing them to use tranquilizers and warning Carter not to let the mission fail. Finally, Ash Williams arrived at Neil's facility, demanding answers. Neil tried to calm him, explaining that his presence was necessary to prevent further incidents. Ash demanded to know Jason's whereabouts, declaring that he intended to make him pay for his actions. Maggie urged Ash to come inside, promising that they all had a stake in bringing down both Freddy and Jason. Ash sat with a group of tense survivors, craving a stronger drink as Maggie reminded them to stay focused. Dr. Neil Gordon explained that each of them possessed special abilities, having survived encounters with Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees. He and Maggie pledged to help them harness their powers to finally defeat Freddy and Jason. However, Stephen Freeman accused them of reigniting the nightmare he'd tried to shield his daughter Stephanie from. Suddenly, Jason Voorhees smashed through the wall, shattering the group's sense of security. Recognizing Jason, Ash warned everyone to get down. Stephen, in shock, faced Jason, but was killed instantly with a machete through his head. Stephanie screamed in horror, while Ash prepared his chainsaw, understanding that Jason had tracked the Michigan survivor, putting everyone in peril. A green truck crashed into the room, driven by a masked figure who ordered the survivors to escape. Ash helped Stephanie into the truck, with Dr. Gordon assisting others. As they fled, Maggie demanded to know who their rescuer was. The masked man revealed himself as Tommy Jarvis, Jason's arch-enemy from the final chapter, A New Beginning and Jason Lives. He explained that he had a personal history with Jason and was there to end him once and for all. Chapter 3, Army of Darkness. A tactical team surrounded a house preparing to confront Jason Voorhees. They intended to proceed efficiently, aiming to avoid another disaster like the Crystal Lake debacle. Agent Carter confirmed that they had Jason in their sights and instructed his team to tag and bag him. As the team moved into position, laser sights focused on Jason, who stood motionless inside the house. Carter gave the command to open fire, and a barrage of bullets tore into Jason's body, causing significant damage as they punctured his torso repeatedly. Despite the onslaught, Jason remained standing. Carter ordered the team to initiate the snake bite tactic, deploying a heavy weapon that released a powerful gas, finally bringing Jason down. The team secured him, preparing for extraction to Black Book HQ. Meanwhile, at the Stabe Motel, a group of survivors gathered, each with their own traumatic history with Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees. Alongside Ash, Tommy, and Dr. Neil Gordon, there were Alice Johnson from A Nightmare on Elm Street, 4. The Dream Master, Jacob Johnson, the son of Dream Master, Alice Johnson and Dan Jordan from A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Child, Maggie Burrows from Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, Tina Shepard from Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, and Rennie Wickham from Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Tommy Jarvis was adamant that Jason was his responsibility, emphasizing that he had defeated Jason before and could do so again. Maggie argued that Jason and Freddy were too powerful for one person to handle alone and insisted that they needed a united approach to end their reign of terror. She explained that each person in the room had faced and survived Freddy or Jason, and their unique abilities could be the key to defeating them for good. Rennie revealed her empathic abilities, explaining how she could feel the emotions of those around her and draw strength from them, a power she used to survive Jason's rampage in Manhattan. Jacob shared that he had inherited his mother Alice's power over dreams, allowing him to bring people into his nightmares to confront their fears, as he had done with Freddy. Tina recounted her experience with Jason, mentioning her telekinetic abilities that had helped her fight back against him in her past. Tensions flared between Tommy and Ash, who taunted each other's methods. Tommy, who had fought Jason multiple times, felt he understood Jason better than anyone, but Ash mocked him, claiming he'd handled worse threats alone and knew how to deal with zombies like Jason. Ash bragged about his experience with the Necronomicon and his battles with Deadites, insisting that Jason was just another monster to chop up. Maggie intervened, refocusing the group and explaining that her agency had recovered the Necronomicon, a book that could be pivotal in their fight against both Freddy and Jason. She asserted that with the survivors' combined abilities and the power of the Necronomicon, they could finally end the nightmare once and for all. Jacob recalled the horror of Freddy killing everyone he loved, while Tina, visibly shaken, explained that her telekinetic powers once brought her father back from the dead, only for Jason to kill him again. Maggie empathized with each survivor, emphasizing that their pain and trauma were what made them strong enough to face down the monsters who had terrorized them. She urged each survivor to focus on their strengths, reminding them that only together, with the Necronomicon as their weapon, could they stand a chance against Freddy and Jason. While Jacob and Stephanie stayed back, the others planned to take on Freddy and Jason. Later, Jason Voorhees was transported, restrained in heavy bindings. One guard recounted Jason's deadly reputation of having killed 13 men at the Necronomicon extraction site. Another added that Jason looked and smelled like decaying roadkill. They sarcastically said that he'd fit right in with the Deadites held in the same facility. Glad at least he wouldn't taunt them with threats like the others. As Jason was locked into a cell, an alert sounded, a Deadite containment breach. Inside the holding area, monstrous voices taunted Jason, threatening to devour him. The guards left, locking him up. In the depths of the facility, Freddy Krueger emerged, gloating at Jason's predicament. Freddy mocked Jason's allegiance to his mother, calling him a mindless tool. He taunted Jason, declaring his own control over the Necronomicon's power. Freddy explained that, with the book's power, he had escaped his torment from the Deadite dimension and intended to exact revenge on the world. Suddenly, Freddy's plan was interrupted as Jason, furious and unrestrained by fear, attacked him. Freddy tried to halt Jason, revealing he planned to use him as his champion, intending to lead a Deadite army to terrorize the world, and Jason got to kill the kids who had escaped, especially Tommy Jarvis. Jason paused and adhered. With his powers, Freddy turned Jason into his prime version, with his entire body restored. In Washington, D.C., the survivors, including Ash, Maggie, and others, approached a government facility to meet with Project Black Book's leader, Gordon Russell. As they entered, Russell was skeptical of their motives and had them detained for questioning. Maggie tried to reason with him, but he dismissed her and sent Ash, Tina, and Alice into custody. Maggie, Neil, and Rennie were taken to meet Krueger in the interrogation room. Meanwhile, something struck Ash. Why did Maggie introduce herself to Russell when she said that her father was in charge of the Black Book operation? Inside, Freddy changed back to his usual form and revealed his mastery over the Necronomicon to Russell. The book was a part of his body and gave him godlike power. Russell said that Freddy's powers were in his glove and lunged to stab him with those, but Maggie headbutted him and took the glove. She stabbed and killed Russell, declaring him unworthy of his delusions of power. Freddy, amused by the betrayal, encouraged Maggie's ruthlessness. With a chilling final scene, Maggie fully embraced her dark side. She was actually Catherine Krueger, Freddy's daughter. Freddy, reveling in the chaos, closed in on Maggie, kissing her with twisted affection as she returned his malevolent embrace, sealing their alliance in wicked union. Neil pulled Maggie and kissed her, trying to make her remember who she was. At that instant, Maggie slashed Neil's stomach, wounding him. As she gave Freddy his glove back, his powers surged and Catherine grew razors out of her fingers. Her dress changed too. Maggie approached Rennie with a menacing look, and in one swift motion, drove her clawed glove into Rennie's abdomen, spilling her guts and killing her. Freddy watched this brutality unfold, and with teary eyes, said, "That's my girl." In another area, Tina felt Rennie's death empathically, and the pain of losing her brought her to tears. Ash tried to console her, but Tina insisted that Maggie had caused Rennie's death, emphasizing that Maggie was no longer herself, but rather Freddy's daughter. Meanwhile, alarms blared as the prison compound's security began to fail. Ash urged Tina to use her powers to break them out of the cell. With concentration, Tina utilized her telekinetic abilities, managing to shatter the cell door open, allowing them to escape. Realizing they needed to arm themselves, they set off to find weapons. As the security collapsed entirely, chaos erupted, and prisoners, including Jason, stormed free. He was leading an army of Deadites who were slicing and devouring everyone in sight. Before Ash could take a stab at Jason, Tina sealed off the path using her powers, and the Deadites pointed at the civilians outside and screamed at Jason and said, "Kill the mortals!" Chapter 4. The New Dream Warriors. A Deadite shouted, "The Chosen One is here!" just as it was slammed against a wall. Ash, armed with his mechanical hand, replied confidently, "And so is my fist. Let me introduce you to my knuckles." He then punched the demon in the face, splattering it with blood. As Ash, Tina, and Alice stepped over the defeated creature, he sensed an ominous presence nearby, something that felt ancient and evil. He then spotted the book and confirmed, "Yeah, that's it, all right, Necronomicon Ex Mortis." As Ash picked up the Necronomicon, a massive mechanical creature, controlled by Freddy Krueger, appeared with deadly blades. The robot taunted them, mentioning that Krueger's previous role had been translating the Necronomicon, but had now shifted to dismembering his enemies. Alice quickly urged Tina to use her abilities before the robot could kill them all. The robot advanced on them, and Freddy's voice continued to mock Tina, calling her his little telekinetic slasher girl. Tina summoned her powers to fight off the robot. Ash taunted back, doubting that Krueger seriously thought a giant erection set would be able to take him down. Ash held the Necronomicon tightly as he faced off against the robot, sarcastically calling it a devil toaster and suggesting it was more like a tin can. The robot struck at him, but Ash dodged and threw it into a high voltage area. The shock caused the robot to screech in agony, sparking wildly as it overloaded on electricity. Outside, Jason Voorhees stood, surrounded by Deadites. He looked at the destruction emotionless. Washington was under siege. Deadites attacked civilians, tearing them apart, while Jason methodically slashed his way through the crowd. These Deadites were connected to Jason's origin, as they originated from the Necronomicon, the same book that had resurrected Jason. One of the civilians shed down his disguise as Jason threw his machete towards him. It was Tommy Jarvis. He dodged the machete and said, "I know the secret, Jason. I know how to kill you." Tommy recounted every encounter he'd had with Jason and vowed to be the one who would finally send him back to hell, even if it meant sacrificing his own life. He fired his guns at Jason, shouting, "Die, you filthy bastard! Die!" as he held his ground. A group of flying Deadites soon overwhelmed him, claiming, "Krueger has plans for you." Despite his struggle, the creatures overpowered him and dragged him away. From a distance, Jason watched. Back at the Stabe Motel, Jacob lay in bed, bewildered by the candles that had suddenly appeared around him. He heard a voice. It was Stephanie, who suggested they get to know each other better now that her father was gone. Jacob, visibly confused and uneasy, wondered what was happening as Stephanie moved closer with seductive intent. Stephanie, dressed provocatively, climbed on top of Jacob, asking if he was a virgin. Jacob stammered, unable to give a clear response. Stephanie took control, talking about the excitement of the first kiss, the first touch, as they grew closer. She teased him when he reacted prematurely, taunting him for his quick response. Suddenly, Stephanie's expression turned sinister. She mocked Jacob further, ridiculing his lack of control. Her true intentions became clear as she laughed maniacally, revealing she intended to kill him and drink up that special survivor power inside him. Jacob, horrified, cried out for his mother Alice. On July the 3rd, in a congressional special emergency session, tensions ran high as a congressman voiced his frustration, urging his colleague Haynes to end his filibuster so everyone could go home. Another congressman pushed back, reminding him that the public expected them to fix the country, not cut their session short. They argued over political power, accusing each other of using it irresponsibly. Suddenly, a loud crash interrupted their heated exchange, prompting calls for security. Right at that moment, Jason and the Deadites stormed into the congressional chamber. The Deadites mocked the frightened congressman, chanting, dead little pigs, let us in!" Jason and the Deadites, slaughtering the politicians as blood and guts erupted. One congressman screamed, "No! No! No!" as Jason and the Deadites danced in the massacre, devouring souls in a bloody frenzy. One congressman yelled, "Out of the way! Move!" But the Deadites taunted them further, declaring, "We will feast upon your souls!" Blood and gore splattered everywhere, and panic set in. Another congressman was gruesomely impaled through the head by a pole, his screams echoing as others desperately ran for their lives. Meanwhile, Ash and his allies regrouped. Tina was injured, Ash reassured her. "Take it easy, kid. It's just a flesh wound." But suddenly Tina heard Jacob's call for help. They knew they had to rescue Jacob, who had fallen asleep and was now vulnerable to Freddy's powers. Alice prepared to enter the dream world to save him, activating a portal that would take them into Jacob's nightmare to confront Freddy and pull him out. In the dream, Freddy confronted Alice in the avatar of Stephanie, mocking her and daring her to fight back. He taunted her with the notion that no one was left to save her. Alice mustered her courage and fought back, but Freddy's powers were limitless. He shed the skin of Stephanie and revealed his true self, while leaving the real Stephanie crying in pain on the floor with no skin on her body. Ash threw CDs at Freddy's face and cut him deep. Then he lunged towards him, but was stopped by Freddy mid-air, frozen completely. Freddy mocked Ash's previous victories, proclaiming himself the king in the dream world. Freddy escaped with Jacob while inviting all of them to the White House, where a bloody massacre was taking place. As Kruger's nightmare broke, Ash, Alice and Tina landed into Stephanie's dream, where she was still lying in pain, skinless. Alice said that there was a chance that Stephanie was still alive in the real world. They just had to put her back in the proper state. Alice and Tina took her skin and helped her wear it. Then Alice counted to 3 and brought all of them back to the real world. But she was still in fear that the trauma caused to Stephanie in the dream may have broken her mind. Outside the White House, chaos and fiery destruction spread. Agent Carter and his allies defended themselves against Freddy's monstrous force. The eerie rhyme, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you, echoed ominously, hinting at even greater horrors to come as Freddy prepared for total domination. With a sinister grin, Freddy addressed the nation, first as the president and then changing into himself. He revealed his dark intentions to instill fear across America, introducing his new policy ominously titled, "No Kid Left Alive." Ash crushed the TV where Freddy's speech was broadcasting, cursing it. He gathered the group and laid out the dire situation, explaining they could either play it safe or go all in to stop Freddy Krueger and save the kids. He emphasized the need to take the fight to Krueger, meaning they'd have to storm a city overrun with evil, facing Freddy, Jason and the Deadites on their own ground. He asked Alice, Stephanie and Tina if they were with him. Alice replied, "He has my son. What do you think?" Tina answered, "I'm in." Stephanie hesitated, but Ash encouraged them, saying they could either sit back and let these monsters continue ruining lives or fight back. They needed to gather weapons first though, and he emphasized that the power of the book was going to be key in putting an end to the chaos once and for all. As they prepared, Ash and his group ventured to a pawn shop, breaking in to grab weapons and supplies. He urged everyone to grab anything they could use, noting it wasn't much, but it would have to do. As Ash armed himself with his chainsaw and shotgun, he delivered a rallying cry, proclaiming they'd take Freddy down, comparing it to sending Al Gore packing at a cigar bar. The others each armed themselves with their chosen weapons. Stephanie got swords, Alice got guns, and Tina had her telekinetic powers. Ash rallied his team and led the charge through the darkened city, determined to end the nightmare, saying, "Let's go carve us up some freaks." Chapter 5. Hell on Earth. In the midst of a fiery and chaotic Washington, Ash and his team confronted the harsh reality of the dead rising. The city was overrun with Deadites and demons, all unleashed by the Necronomicon's influence. Once filled with tourists and officials, the streets now bore scenes of carnage. Ash acknowledged the enormity of the task before him and his small group. As they strategized, the group recognized that Freddy and Jason were entrenched within the White House alongside Alice's son and countless other innocents. Getting past the security and reaching their targets would be an impossible feat under normal circumstances, but with the threat level at its peak, Ash resolved to put everything on the line to end the nightmare. His former plans for a peaceful life had died long ago, and he was ready to take both Freddy and Jason down. Outside the White House, the sky turned crimson and blood began to rain down, unnerving Ash's companions. Tina voiced her disgust, and Ash joked about the rain, speculating it was another fear tactic from Krueger. The team began formulating a plan, and Ash proposed pushing through the waves of monsters to confront Freddy and Jason directly, while Alice focused on saving Jacob. She doubted Ash's leadership, questioning his competence with sarcasm, which he countered with equal disdain. As the blood rain continued, Stephanie shifted away from them. She stared blankly at her reflection in the bloody water below. With her mind already broken by Freddy's nightmare, her father had been killed by Jason, and she felt personally responsible. She marked herself with the blood. Determined to devise a more tactical approach, Ash decided they needed a distraction. His plan involved drawing the attention of the Deadites and then using the Necronomicon to banish Freddy and Jason back to hell. Suddenly, they realized that Stephanie had slipped away unnoticed. In the distance, a fleet of helicopters and fighter jets approached, providing the distraction they desperately needed. Ash's team watched the military forces converge on the White House. Ash took charge, instructing his team to stay low as soldiers and tanks filled the streets. He observed that the army's presence would keep the Deadites occupied while they sneaked inside. His team moved quickly, evading the Deadite-infested areas as soldiers fought the supernatural forces. The battle at the White House grew intense. Demonic entities, armed and ready, chanted macabre taunts, while soldiers retaliated with unstoppable fire. Explosions and gunfire filled the air as the soldiers struggled to hold back the supernatural onslaught. As helicopters circled above, Freddy's monstrous face emerged from the crimson clouds, laughing maniacally. The apparition taunted the soldiers, destroying their helicopters one by one with fiery breaths. The military's assault appeared futile in the face of such overwhelming darkness. Ash wielded his chainsaw, cleaving through enemies with brutal efficiency. He advanced, shouting, "Knock! Knock! Chainsaw calling!" as he dispatched the undead. He instructed Tina to use her telekinetic powers, urging her to drop a tank onto their enemies. Though Tina doubted her abilities, she summoned her strength, preparing to lift the heavy vehicle. Inside her dream, Stephanie wandered through a haunting landscape, whispering, "Blood, blood, blood." She arrived at a church where a priestly figure invited her inside, warning that the streets were filled with horrors. Freddy, disguised as the priest, described a grim reality. Hell's minions roamed freely, slaughtering innocents and devouring souls. He told Stephanie that while he'd read about such events in the Bible, he never thought he'd witness them. Calling her special, he hinted that her soul held a unique power and a dark destiny, which unsettled Stephanie, especially when he mysteriously knew her name. Suddenly, Jason appeared, grabbing her. Stephanie screamed and struggled against him, only for Freddy to materialize in his true form, laughing menacingly. He taunted her, claiming to know all the little children's names, including hers, and revealed that she shared the same bloodline as Jason. He explained that her father had tried to hide her destiny, but he saw it clearly. Deep within her lay a black beating heart, ready to unleash an unstoppable killer. Freddy pressed on her heart, triggering a transformation. Power surged within Stephanie, and she grabbed Freddy by the throat, silencing him. Donning a hockey mask and wielding a machete, she declared, "From a Voorhees he was born, from a Voorhees he will die." She walked away, determined to fulfill her dark purpose, to kill Jason. Freddy laughed, satisfied with the killer he had awakened in her. Freddy stood smugly in the room, pleased that the soldiers outside would be distracted. He announced that all he needed now was the Necronomicon and the last few survivors. Eyeing Tommy, who was bound and defiant, Freddy mocked him. He considered killing Tommy on the spot, eager to devour his survivor soul for an extra boost of power. Jason, standing nearby, watched silently. Jason, undeterred, attacked, wanting to kill Tommy himself, but Freddy unleashed Catherine on Jason, instructing her to handle him. Catherine attacked Jason from behind, slashing him and opening a deep wound. However, Jason quickly turned, caught her, and threw her across the room. Jason then advanced on Freddy, attacking with rage, but Freddy dodged him effortlessly. Just as Jason prepared another strike, Catherine returned and impaled him from behind with the American flag. Jason, unnervingly calm, pulled the flag out from the front of his body, ready to continue the fight. Right at that moment, Tina used her telekinesis to crash a tank through the wall, crushing Catherine in the process. Ash emerged from the tank and shouted, "Shoo this!" as he fired a high-explosive round at Freddy, hurling him outside. Meanwhile, Ash freed Tommy, and outside, Alice confronted Freddy. She aimed her guns at him, saying, "You should have stayed dead, Kruger. It would have saved me the pain of blasting you back to hell." Freddy sneered. "Please, Alice, give me a break. You and your little brat friends couldn't kill me. Jason couldn't kill me. My own daughter couldn't snuff out my light. Even that bitch of a mother couldn't keep me locked away," he continued, taunting her. "So what makes you think that you and these other misfits have any chance of stopping me now?" Alice replied, "There's only one Dream Master, Kruger, and that's me. I'd rather see hell on earth than let you and your twisted offspring live happily ever after." She said, "Kristen gave me the Dream Master powers when she died, so I'd have a way to defend myself and others against you. But I'm sick now, dying, and the dream powers couldn't save me. She glanced back at her son, Jacob, before saying, "So maybe it's time I pay the powers forward." With that, Alice dropped her guns and let Freddy stab and kill her, transferring her Dream Master powers to Jacob. She collapsed, and Jacob, overwhelmed with newfound energy, stepped forward. Freddy watched in shock as Jacob, now imbued with the powers and surrounded by the spirits of Freddy's victims, declared, "I'm the Dream Master now, Kruger, and all the innocent souls you butchered are going to help me kill you." Jacob stood surrounded by a glowing aura, his energy ignited by the spirits of the children Freddy Krueger had tormented. Behind him appeared a ghostly nun radiating light, Freddy's own mother, Amanda Krueger. With a firm voice, Jacob expressed regret that he hadn't been able to stop Freddy from birth, but swore that he would end him now. He proclaimed that Freddy's victims would be his undoing. Freddy's undead forces began to panic, their confidence shattered as spirits reached out and grabbed them, dragging them into spectral darkness. Cries of the Deadites filled the air. "What are they?" and "It's got me! It's got me!" Meanwhile, Freddy looked on in horror, defiantly shouting, "I took your powers and devoured your souls." Tommy, exhilarated, cheered at the sight, pointing out how the ghosts were dismantling Freddy's army. Ash, observing the spectral chaos, commented on the effectiveness of Amanda's ghostly presence. The ghost nun. Waves of spectral energy poured from Jacob, disintegrating Freddy's forces as the spirits of Freddy's victims tore through the ranks. Each member of the group witnessed the unleashed power with a mixture of relief and amazement. Freddy, now stripped of his forces and standing alone, faced Jacob and his mother, Amanda Krueger. Amanda confronted her son, telling him it was time for him to leave the living world and allow the souls he'd tormented to finally rest. Freddy, visibly frustrated, protested, muttering, "No, I was so close." But Amanda demanded that he let the children sleep in peace. Freddy tried to mask his desperation with a mocking laugh, addressing her as Mama and dismissing her attempt to end him with sparklers. Freddy sneered, "It ain't that easy to get rid of me, bitch." Saying this, he wounded Jacob with his razor claws, and Jacob's army of dream warriors vanished. Ash held his chainsaw at the ready, urging everyone to take the chance to end Freddy once and for all. However, Tommy was adamant that he needed to confront Jason, convinced that only he could finish him. Ash reluctantly gave Tommy the space he demanded, agreeing to handle Freddy while Tommy prepared for his own showdown with Jason. Tommy confronted Jason, taunting him about this long-awaited moment. He reminded Jason of the countless innocent lives he'd taken, declaring that he himself would finally bury Jason. The two launched into a brutal, hand-to-hand fight, with Tommy's anger meeting Jason's silent, relentless resolve. They clashed fiercely, each blow fueled by years of rage and vengeance. As the fight raged on, Tommy managed to land multiple strikes, yelling furiously about how Jason had killed everyone he knew and left him as the lone survivor. In a fit of rage, he pummeled Jason with a rock, determined to end the slaughter once and for all. Just as Tommy caught his breath, he saw Jason's face, now reformed, and he stopped. At that moment, Jason struck back with lethal force, stabbing Tommy in the shoulder. Caught off guard, Tommy looked at Jason in shock as blood trickled from his mouth, his strength fading. He shouted at Jason to finish the job. Meanwhile, Jacob lay weakened on the ground. Tina tried to control the bleeding and was unable to stop it. Freddy, now desperate but still hungry for power, taunted him, proclaiming, "I am eternal, I am forever." Freddy fed on the souls around him to regain strength. However, his form began to unravel, showing signs of vulnerability as his essence weakened. Tina urged Ash to take Jacob to a hospital. Ash handed the Necronomicon to Neil and directed him to read the right passage and send Freddy and Jason back to hell. With Neil struggling to read from the Necronomicon, Ash confronted Freddy directly, wielding his chainsaw and meeting the weakened villain head-on. Freddy slashed Ash's hand and dislodged it. Ash retaliated by grabbing Freddy's arm and twisting it, snapping it backward. Freddy screamed in pain as Ash's fierce attack momentarily subdued him. Neil stood before the Necronomicon, desperate and afraid, knowing he couldn't decipher its words and fearing they were all doomed. In his despair, Nancy Thompson's spirit appeared beside him, offering reassurance. She told him they would stop Freddy together, urging him to trust her. Neil, stunned, asked how she could be there. She urged Neil to let her assist, and with a determined look, she merged into his body, becoming one with him. Together, they chanted the incantation, Kla tu Varata Nikto, summoning an intense surge of energy from the book, which shot directly at Freddy, causing him to scream in agony. Meanwhile, in the fierce battle against Jason, Tina and Jacob struggled as Jason loomed over them, ready to strike. Just as his machete swung down, Stephanie appeared behind Jason, driving her own machetes into his back. The attack weakened Jason, and in that brief moment, Tommy seized the opportunity. Grabbing a shard of glass, Tommy leaped and decapitated Jason with a powerful swipe. Jason's head rolled onto the ground, his mother's voice echoing, "No one is ever going to hurt you again." Triumphant, Tommy lifted Jason's head high and proclaimed, "Jason Voorhees is dead." The combined powers of Neil and Nancy continued to overwhelm Freddy. Furious, Freddy cursed Nancy, but his defiance began to crumble as the dream demons that had once empowered him turned against him, recognizing his betrayal. Everything started getting sucked into the vortex. Whilst the others held on to something, Agent Carter was pulled inside. The Necronomicon itself animated with wrath, accusing Freddy of lying and betraying its power. Freddy's powers drained from him, sucked into the vortex the book created, leaving his earthly body weak and vulnerable. Desperate, Freddy pleaded, but the Necronomicon showed no mercy, stripping him of his hellish strength. As Freddy lay weakened, Ash stepped forward, looking down at his defeated foe. "You want forgiveness for what you've done, Kruger?" he taunted, raising his boomstick. Then he said, "Ask the kids you killed for it when you get to hell." Saying this, Ash blasted Freddy's chest open, delivering a fatal shot that left Freddy's earthly body shattered. Freddy's corpse was sucked into the vortex, his screams fading as he was pulled into oblivion. With Freddy gone and the vortex closed, Neil felt an overwhelming sense of relief as Nancy's spirit prepared to depart. She told him that Freddy's victims could finally rest, but as she began to fade, Neil pleaded with her to stay, saying he needed her. Nancy gave him a bittersweet smile, saying goodbye and promising to always love him. Heartbroken, Neil watched her disappear, left with both grief and solace, knowing Freddy was truly defeated and his loved ones could finally find peace. The nightmare had ended. Ash instructed the others to get Jacob and Stephanie to a hospital, suggesting they'd need serious medical help, including a really good shrink. He warned them to hurry before more authorities arrived. Tommy, after receiving words of encouragement, thanked Ash and said his goodbyes to the group, determined to seek a fresh start and move forward from his past nightmares. As they prepared to part ways, Tina kissed Ash goodbye, asking if they'd see him again. Ash replied that he'd already spent too long running from their shared fate. He contemplated his next destination, humorously noting that misery seemed to follow him around like an unwanted hemorrhoid from hell. With a hint of optimism, he mentioned he might head for Texas, hoping for some semblance of peace. Meanwhile, Tommy voiced concern over the future and the ongoing threats that still loomed. Reflecting on the potential return of enemies like Jason and Freddy, he urged the group to be vigilant and ready, suggesting they could use their experiences and powers to protect others in the future. Tommy accepted the role as the leader of the Nightmare Warriors, promising to watch over the kids who had survived and ensure they had someone to guide them through the darkness they had faced. Ash took off on his motorcycle, heading away from the capital, his thoughts with loved ones he had lost to evil, including Carrie. He reflected on his mission, reaffirming that though he had succeeded in destroying both Freddy and Jason, the victory did little to lessen his pain. The capital loomed behind him as he embraced the king's life, riding off into an uncertain future. In the aftermath, Jason's cracked hockey mask lay abandoned on the ground, but his body and head were missing. His mother's voice echoed, "Jason, you can never die, Jason. You can never die." In a flashback to 1964, at the Springwood Police Department, Agent Carter found himself amongst officers who celebrated getting a warrant to arrest Freddy Krueger, intent on bringing him to justice for his heinous crimes. Carter already knew that Freddy's warrant had been misplaced and never officially signed. That was why he was burned alive by the people of Elm Street. However, he was too disoriented from travelling to the portal to understand anything. He signed the warrant, and that somehow changed Freddy's origin. The sequence of events and Freddy's history was altered. He may come back in the future, in a different avatar, to haunt the world once more. As a chilling laugh echoed through the scene, Freddy's presence loomed ominously over the town's sign, suggesting that his malevolent influence might still linger over Springwood. Marvelous verdict. That's it for today, my horror mongers. As the final blow landed and the dust settled, only Ash stood victorious. Yet, we all know that Freddy and Jason are never truly gone, as hinted in the aftermath, and when they rise again, so will Ash, ready to bring them down once more. Our channel will be here to cover every bloody moment of the carnage. That's a promise made in blood. But for now, Ash has proven once again that no demon, monster, or undead slasher can withstand the Chosen One, evil, dead for good.